There's a bit more though. What if I was to tell you that in March of 1958, this is what they're going to look like? This fellow worked at the CIA. He was a photo interpreter. Wonderful name, Dino Borgione. I just love saying that. I feel like I'm Italian. Saw this and said, oh my gosh, this is identical to Marconi. This is a French production reactor. He then did the photo interpret boards, gave it to his boss. His boss went to Eisenhower and the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. This is in March or thereabouts. And what was the response of the president to this? Very interesting. Zip. Didn't say what. It was, as he noted in his memoirs, and he does have memoirs, it was as if they wanted the Israelis to have these weapons. That was in 58. Why does that matter? It was in late 57 that Ben-Gurion asked the U.S. government, could you give us security guarantees in conventional arms? Well, what's your unconventional arms? And we came back before Eisenhower left office and said, nah. What if we had given security guarantees? Now, there's no way of knowing. It's like, kind of factual, but maybe if we leaned on them, they might not have completed this. What do we have now? They have nuclear weapons, and we're giving them security guarantees. Well, maybe we could have given them security guarantees, and they would have gotten the bomb. Oh well, think about it. A lot of people say things are inevitable because they've happened. Maybe not. But there was a choice made here, is what I'm trying to get at. Now, the pathology of this case goes further. All this has to do with intelligence. In 1979, there was a flash off the coast of South Africa. This is the readout of what's called a spy satellite called the Vela satellite. It was an older thing, and it would register the emissions that come from a nuclear blast that are in the following spectrums. Let me make sure I get this right. Neutron, gamma, and X-rays and light emissions. What happens when an explosion of a nuclear weapon occurs is you have a fireball, and it's literally a ball that goes out. Also goes up because it's hot. Heat rises. You ever seen the mushroom cloud? It's the fireball rising. That's what you're looking at. But what we want to focus on is that fireball explodes outward very quickly. And as it does, it pushes the air around the ball and it compresses it. And what happens then is there's a spike in energy that you can see. And then with that compressed air around the ball, it makes it difficult to see all the energy because that compressed air acts as an insulator. And so the signal goes down. But as the fireball continues to grow, that compressed protector, or insulator, goes away. Signal goes up again. But then eventually the fireball exhausts itself and the energy goes down again. This is called the double hump. And it is unique to nuclear weapons explosions in the atmosphere. The first of these double humps was for a known nuclear test that was French. This is what happened with an older Vela satellite that was almost out of commission. And it immediately prompted a lot of hand-wringing. Now, it wasn't just that. On the same day, we have a naval research lab that listens to hydroacoustic waves. That's fancy talk for what's going on under the water that we can hear. Now, why would the Navy care about that?
Submarines.
Submarines! Gotta find it. They were also listening for French nuclear tests in the Pacific. The signals were almost identical for a French nuclear test as it was for this thing off the South African coast. In addition, there's something, we have an ionics emanation radio telescope in Puerto Rico, and it picked up signals, disturbances in the upper atmosphere, again akin to a nuclear test. As a result of all of these things, the NSC initially, the National Security Council, told President Carter at the time, high confidence this is a nuclear test. What do you suppose the President of the United States did when he got this information?
Nothing.
Well, that's a pretty good answer, but he actually not only did nothing, he freaked out. Why did he freak out? This gets back to a little bit of history. First, at the time, the President of the United States was pushing to get passage and ratification in the Senate of something called the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, STALT II agreement. And the notion was that, well, of course you have to verify that, right? And the critics were saying, well, it's not verifiable, limits aren't verifiable. If he couldn't say yay or nay about this test, how the heck was he going to persuade the Senate that he could verify a complex agreement with the Russians? So that put him in a kind of funny place, but there's more. At the time, he also was negotiating a peace agreement between the Arabs and the Israelis. And if he couldn't speak truth with regard to what the Israelis were doing here, why would the Arabs want to come to an agreement brokered by the United States with Israel? Not only that, but little known fact. Israel had signed and ratified an agreement internationally known as the Limited Test Ban Treaty. They weren't supposed to do this. This was a violation of an international arms limitation. So, has anybody here heard of the expression alternative facts? Yeah, everybody's smiling. You know that. Do you know where that came from? You don't. What is it that Carter asked for from a bunch of scientists called the Rowena panel? He wanted an alternative explanation. Funny how this stuff works. You know? What goes around comes around, or I mean, it just keeps coming back. Alternative explanation. They got all these scientists together. They said, please explain how you could get this some other way than a nuclear explosion. Guess what they came up with? Oh, cosmic dust, a reflection. Now, does anybody know what the odds that they put that this might be? Says something when I have it. This is instructive. What's acceptable as a proof? What do you suppose the agreed odds were? 1 in how many possibilities? 1 in 100? Keep going.
1 in a billion.
You're getting close. 1 in 100 billion. I like the way you think, though. Okay, good enough. We're done. That actually put the kibosh on looking at this thing. Whoa. Really? The answer is yep. Okay. Why did I drag you through that? First of all, a lot of great stories, right? Pictures. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Did the South African government at the time give Israelis permission to
Oh,
visit
yeah.
off their coast? Was that because they were working on their own nuclear program at the time and
They wanted-
to share technologies?
Yeah.
Okay, before they banned it.
There's a book by a South African fellow who's now an editor on foreign policy. His name's Sasha, oh gosh, hang on here, let's see if I can get that for you. And it's a book about this, a little bit, about the nuclear cooperation. And South Africans were complicit. I should add, the one missing piece of evidence with regard to this test that made the Rowena panel go down was they couldn't find the fallout. There was some fallout in Australia. But it turns out, when they reviewed the data more recently, and what was the data? What they were doing in South Africa was conveyed to Australia because Australians did a service for the United States and themselves, and that was occasionally whenever they slaughtered sheep, they would take their thyroids and examine how much iodine 131 there was. And that's fallout from an explosion. And they had the data, and the way the data looked uneven, and so they said, well, there's not a clear proof. They re-examined that data about 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's pretty conclusive. They reordered the data properly. It was misfiled, if you will. But to get back to your question, let's see if I can the name of that book. Hang on here. This isn't easy. If it gets much harder, we'll have to do it after class. Come on. Oh. I'll have to get back to you after class.
Sure.
But it's a good question. All right. So I dragged you through all that so I could kind of wave my hands and get you engaged a little, but also because this kind of suggests that the idea that what was needed was timely, actionable intelligence to get policymakers to do the right thing actually doesn't really work here. The U.S. did not act despite what I would argue was pretty timely, and I would argue actionable intelligence. Not only that, but there was a treaty, limited test ban treaty, and it was clearly violated. And the evidence that came in was not only ignored, but denied. And it's not a wall kind of problem. It isn't that anybody cooked the intelligence so much as they ignored or explained it away. Now, this is an interesting point. When we had some of the has-beens around, we talked about this case. Someone got up and said, I've always thought that whenever the CIA came in to visit me, and this was somebody at an undersecretary level, pretty senior, number 3, 4, 5 in the State Department. He said, I never really got the impression that they were telling us all that they knew. And I looked into this. There were a lot of reasons why that could have been the case. There's a book about Angleton, who was in charge of operations, running agents. He was very tight with Mossad, and they were working to fight in the Cold War, and the Israelis were very helpful. Well, would you jeopardize your relationship with that government and Mossad to give evidence to policymakers who didn't want to do anything with the evidence? Maybe not. Here's a good example of that. Those inspections I talked about with the Israelis, what if I was to tell you that none of the people who were American who went on those inspections knew any Hebrew? Now, is anybody here is Jewish? Anybody? No? Okay. The old days, you'd all be Jewish. Okay. Every, even poorly practicing Jew, has to get bar mitzvah. There are a lot of American Jews. They all went through this ordeal. They knew Hebrew. You mean to tell me they couldn't find one person in the United States who knew Hebrew? How do you do an inspection in Israel if you don't know the language? You gotta be kidding me. And the answer is, well, that's what we do. Could be an accident, but hard to believe they didn't have anybody who knew Hebrew. The State Department had lots of people who knew Hebrew. They were in the embassy. They could have spared one. They didn't. They could have been pulling their punch because they realized there was no market for this information. Why jeopardize other things to supply it? That's speculation, but how shall I put it? It came from somebody else, not me.